coming up on the Knowledge Industry Podcast.
We surveyed over 1,200 full-time American employees, and we found out that 85% of them said they would be significantly better at their job if they had communication skills that they could use. 75% of them had never been offered a communication training at their current job, right? So we have leadership training, we have sales training, we have business training, we have HR training. What is the number one problem we all face, no matter what industry we're in? Communication.
My guest today is Ryan Avery, who in 2012 was the youngest ever world champion of public speaking at the age of 25. He's traveled the world showing leaders how to go from A to the in their industry. More recently, Ryan's had to make the transition to speaking virtually and also has successful online courses. So what is the trick to great communication to educate and inspire?
Do you sell online courses or run live workshops? Do you have expertise that can help people in life or business? Are you even running an online training empire from your kitchen table? Then you're part of the knowledge industry, a fast-growing industry that means that you can learn almost anything, and anyone can create a business around what's between their ears. Welcome to the Knowledge Industry Podcast with your host, Mark Egan.
So Ryan, it's great to have you with us. Where exactly in the world are you right now?
I am in the United States. I'm in Denver, Colorado right now. Yep. We usually spend our time, we split it between Australia and the US, but they won't let us in Australia right now. So
yeah, well, I mean, that's not bad. Two great places. So I always, with a guest, I look and I think, okay, where do we start their story? Do we start it at school? Do we start it after work? What's the big moment to start with? With you, I mean, you achieved a lot quite early on. And I know we're going to get to this public speaking competition, which sounds like something out of a Hollywood movie. But what was your background? Where did you grow up? Was there any inkling when you were growing up that you'd be doing what you're doing now?
No inkling of what I would be doing now. Absolutely not. I'm from a small town in Humble, Texas. So I grew up in Humble, Texas. And I went to college in Colorado. I met my wife. We moved to Portland, Oregon. I moved all over the place. And then I heard about this competition. I entered it. And that is really what led me into this profession. I didn't, after winning the World Championship of Public Speaking, I wasn't trying to win it to be a professional speaker. The next day, I woke up to 269 emails asking me to speak. And I was like, this is a job? I didn't know this was a job. And I remember the very first payment I ever made for a speech was $200. And I was like, I'm rich! I am the richest person in the world! I thought it was the coolest thing that someone wanted to pay me $200 to hear me speak. But as you know, and the people listening, people don't pay to hear me speak. They pay for my strategies. And so it took me about 6 or 7 years until I really, really understood that concept. And that's when my business started picking up, was about 4 years ago.
But, I can't let you skip over winning that competition. So you were the youngest winner, basically, of the best public speaker competition, which, that's impressive. But my understanding of it is that this wasn't like, you weren't doing public speaking for years and years and you built up to this Hollywood moment. This is, I'm kind of thinking, like films like Cool Runnings and that, where, somebody has no right to be there. But in your case, you're not just competing. Am I right in saying you literally went from nowhere to deciding, actually, let's give it a go at this competition, and then you won it?
Yes, it's wild. And I think a lot of people feel, I really like that Cool Runnings reference, by the way. I feel like people think maybe, I got lucky or something like that. And there was definitely luck involved, but there's two types of luck to me. There's unreliable luck and there's reliable luck. And so when we invest our time in reliable luck and look at the people that we're with, the places that we're in, and the actions that we're taking, we can increase our luck a lot more. So once I entered the competition, I surrounded myself with the right people. I took the right actions, and I was making sure that I was in the right places. And in 8 months, I won the competition.
Now, I know you've been traveling all over the world, speaking. And like you say, not just speaking for the sake of speaking. You're big on, when you speak, it's got to have some transformation. It's got to have an effect. But like many of us, that was all turned upside down with lockdowns. So I'm interested to know, because I've been through this myself. I remember speaking on stages and doing things all over the world, and then suddenly it's the spare room. And for you, it would have been maybe your office. How did you make that transition? What was that like at the very beginning when you're a public speaker, you're out there in front of, lots and lots of faces, and suddenly you've got to change?
Yeah, it's scary. 2020, January 2020, I already had 65 keynotes lined up for the year. It was supposed to be my best year. It was going to be my first $1 million year. And it was awesome. I was excited. And March came around, and then all my events literally within a week were like, bye. It was hard and difficult and crazy and all the above. But I started talking to some people who were thriving in that environment and what they were doing. And here's my theory. Here's my strategy. Here's what I live by. I am not afraid to take a step back if it means it's going to help me take a step forward. And what was happening is there were speakers who were like, this is my fee. How dare you charge me, 1/10 of this for virtual? It's the same value. Well, the market wasn't paying that. So, we slashed fees. We did different things. We were getting our names out there. So I still did over 100 events last year virtual. But I wasn't afraid to go back because now it's propelled me forward. I'm fully booked for 2021. I'm starting to book out 2022. My traveling and in-person events are picking up a lot. I leave for Mexico on Wednesday. So for me, I went backwards. I started doing little associations. I started doing littler events. I started going back. There were plenty of speeches I did for $500, and that's okay. I use this as an opportunity to test new content. I was doing a lot of research and surveying to see where people were and what content they wanted. Then I was sharing that research, and I feel like that's what also got me more speaking events, is because I was using real-time information for what people wanted. And then the big one too that helped me out a lot is I started asking my clients, what's one thing I could do that would help you right now? And so I would ask that question, they would give it to me, and there would be like 3 or 4 people at a time who would like tell me the exact same thing. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll write a Forbes article, or I'll do an infographic, or I'll create a video. And what was happening is I would send it back to them, and people would go, oh, Ryan knows our industry, and they'd share it on their LinkedIn, or they'd share my infographics. And they were ultimately helping me grow my business solely because they were giving me the insight of what they wanted. So those are some things that I did.
And one thing I find interesting is, I've done public speaking, possibly not as much as you, but, one of the things I always found was you went out in front of an audience and you quickly got a vibe, if it was working, or maybe you just needed to tweak something because you got immediate feedback. And the same, delivering both presentations and training online, it's a very different feeling. Now, I was speaking to a few colleagues, and we're trying to work out in our industry, which, most of us are from a media background, why was it that certain people who do trainings and speeches were really struggling and other ones were thriving? And in our kind of industry, a lot of it was down to people who had worked in radio before. Because when you work in radio, you're in a room and you're not getting anything back. So it's up to you to lift your energy, to try and almost build that connection with the audience whilst you're getting zero response. So for you, making that transition, what do you think what's your kind of key to still building the rapport with the audience when, face to face or on stage, you've got that really down. Now you're having to do it through Zoom or something. So how are you finding you're having to change the way you build that rapport and connection?
Ego. You got to let go of your ego. The best book that I read last year was Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy. And I feel like at any of us, at any level, ego can be a really dangerous thing and can creep in really easily, especially once you're starting to speak, to thousands of people and making $20,000 a speech. And it can get real quick, your ego, right? And COVID, it was like, whack, and it just slapped the ego right off your face. And that's where, like you were saying, some people were struggling and some people weren't. The people who weren't struggling, those of us, what I felt, and my belief is that we didn't go into it having an ego of it being about us. So here's my thing is I used to think people paid me to speak. People don't pay me to speak. They pay for my strategies. And here is the thing that I was so afraid of because I was so young getting into this industry was I used to think I had to prove and let people know why I'm good. But what I've ultimately learned is it's not about me looking good, it's about me helping people get good. And so any of us, whether we are virtual or whether we are in person, it's not about looking good, it's about helping people get good. And so that's what I focused on in the virtual world was there are people who are really struggling right now. They are in a tight, but they don't even know how they're going to pay their employees, let alone their mortgages. So I changed the value of what I was delivering to help them get good in the areas and they were. And that's what I did. That's what I do, is I don't focus on, oh, are people going to like me? Oh, how do I look right now? It's yes, I make sure that I look well in the sense of how I feel and comfortable in clothes that I wear. But my job isn't to look good. My job is to help others get good.
And that brings me to my next question, which is for people who have an expertise or, they want to monetize their knowledge somehow. And often, you read the book and it'll say the first thing you need to do is find a niche or a niche and position yourself and then show you're the expert. And then you have maybe your coaching, your online course and all that kind of thing. What is your process if somebody comes to you and they said, look, I've got some area of expertise. Maybe because of COVID, my traditional business has disappeared and I see what you're doing and you're speaking and you're doing all sorts of great stuff. What would your advice to them be?
There are a few things that I hear constantly, and there'll be people who email me or leave me voice messages and they'll say, hey, so I love to speak and I would love to start speaking more. First off, nobody cares that you love to speak. The first question is, are you good at it? Okay, and so because you like it doesn't mean you're good at it. And there are a lot of things that you have to understand and know how to do in this business in order to make sure that you are making people feel good, welcomed, that especially in this new international world that we're living in, that you're making it appropriate and valuable and tangible to everybody. So that's one of the first things that I would say and that I would focus on is, who cares if you like it? Are you really good at it? So get good at it and focus on getting good at it. The other thing that I would focus on is, I hear this too, the first thing we got to do is find a niche. No, if you want to be a professional speaker, the first thing you need to do is figure out how to get paid for it. Okay, and so my first piece of advice is sell something, even if it's for $1, even if it's for $10. If you want to learn the business side of speaking, you have to understand that concept in order to get into it. And when you learn that you can transition or you can sell your service, you can sell an idea for $1, well, then you can sell it for $1 million. But yeah, you gotta learn the business side of speaking as much as you have to know the skills that it takes in order to speak and keep people entertained in an appropriate way.
I can imagine. I mean, even right now, I'm finding myself with vocal tics and things, thinking, oh no, I need to up my game here because, my guest. But you must watch speakers and go to events and maybe the speaker who's on before you. And maybe things that make you cringe and things you think they're doing a really good job there. What are the key things when you're looking at somebody else speak that you're looking at? If somebody said, look, I'm on before you, do you mind giving me some feedback? How do you think it was? What are the things that you're looking for?
So I look at speakers, I look at comedians, I look at media interviews, I look at all ways in which people are delivering themselves and the value that they deliver, right? So one of my favorite strategies that I do is when I watch comedians, because it's really hard. Humor is a very hard thing for me. I'm not a funny guy. People would be like, hey, Ryan Avery, he's a really funny dude. Nobody's really saying that, but in order to professionally speak, you have to make people laugh and enjoy. And there's a lot of benefit to that because it helps build memory when you make people laugh. So if you really want to be professional, you have to learn how to make people laugh. Well, for me, it's hard for me to understand tone and facial expressions. So one of my favorite strategies is I watch a lot of speeches first without sound. So I simply will watch a comedian. I will simply watch it and I will watch no sound. So I see how they're doing a parenthetical, or I'll see how they, use a surprise, or they'll use more facial expressions, or they'll use their body. And that helps me gain insight into, how I should be delivering. And that's ultimately what I'm looking at too. Also, I've learned when people ask you, they want feedback from me. They don't. They simply want me to say something nice, and I've learned that the hard way. You don't really want feedback. Most people don't. Some people do, but I don't really give feedback anymore to people that I don't know,
right?
Because they don't understand. Like I want feedback. I'm like, yeah, tell me. Like I used to push up my glasses like this on stage, and you can't be like, don't be a leader. Be the leader. Like that doesn't work, right? And so someone told me that, and they're like, hey, you should move your glasses like this. Great feedback. But yeah, don't give unsolicited feedback, I would say.
Yeah, I didn't realize there's such a thing as glasses etiquette. I'm thinking, Clark Kent in Superman, we'd always push it up like that when he was supposed to be the bumbling Clark Kent, and then he turns into Superman. It was always weird that nobody recognized him when he took his glasses off. It's just, oh, never seen you before in my life. That was all very weird.
Right?
But the other thing, just watching your videos and seeing the things you do, which you speak about, which I personally think is a hugely underrated skill, is storytelling. Because if you tell a story, people listen, they identify, it can be relatable. But when you look at a lot of corporate communication, especially, and it's all big, buzzwords and people being very complex. And that's something that I presume is just when you're planning out a talk or any kind of communication, you're thinking, okay, which stories can I use?
Absolutely. Yeah. So a lot of people think that they don't have good stories. What I would change the word to then is experiences, because some people don't relate to the story, but first start with the experience. So I like to think of the experience in 3 F's of fears, family, and failures. So when was the last time you had an experience with your family, when you were afraid or when you failed, and build the story from that experience that then adds value? That's how I do it. So my stories all come from my personal life or my professional life. They're all rooted in truth. And that's my style. There are a lot of phenomenal speakers, some that I love. One of my favorites is Simon Sinek. He'll use other people's stories, or he'll share a story of a certain thing in history. That's another way of doing it too. But simply finding an experience and build the story from that.
Because, when you're talking about these stories and people wanting to be on stage, you said something earlier about people come to you and they say, I love speaking, I want to be a speaker. Now, the introvert in me is kind of like, psycho, what do you mean you won? Because I had to step up and learn to speak. I'm not saying I'm the most amazing speaker, but even then I remember speaking, I think it was somewhere in China, a big conference, about 1,000 people. And literally, you're in that kind of panel thing, and then they call you up. Just before then, I got that, I wouldn't say it's like a panic attack, but I just got that moment of, I don't know if you've ever had this, where you think, what the hell am I doing here? There's like all the sort of great and good of the kind of Asian media kind of industry, and I'm going up there to talk. And so, first of all, do you still ever get moments like that where you get that kind of imposter syndrome? What the hell am I doing? Why are they all here to hear me? And how do you deal with if you ever do get that sense of fear before going on stage?
One of the last talks I gave in China was one of the hardest, because I had 2 translators on stage with me, and they were speaking to smaller groups in the front row, and they were speaking Mandarin and Cantonese. So as I'm speaking, they're whispering Mandarin and Cantonese on the side of the stage while other people are listening in English. And there's like 3 groups of laughter. Like it's so hard to comprehend that. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Why am I the one presenting this in China? I don't even speak Mandarin or Cantonese. So I definitely agree with that. There's this saying that I hate though, and it relates to imposter syndrome. And I really feel like it does a lot of disservice to several people, and especially our youth, really anyone. But there's this saying, it's fake it till you make it. Maybe you've heard this before, fake it till you make it. I hate this saying. This saying is ridiculous for so many reasons. First off, you and I, everybody who's listening right now, we have faked nothing to be where we're at. So the saying shouldn't be fake it till you make it. It should be do it until you make it. You know what I've done? I've done it, and I've tried it. Doesn't mean I've done it right. Doesn't mean I've done a good job at it, but I don't fake anything to be here with you today, Mark, and you haven't either. And there's this concept that you think you have to fake your way to success. No. I've done the things that I need to do and want to do in order to be successful, and the same people who are listening to it. So don't, at first, you discredit yourself to think you've faked anything to be here. You've also, like, I have children. I don't want my children thinking I'm faking my way through life. I want them to see me fail. My last world record attempt, my daughter was there with me and I failed. But she saw that I did it. I had 900 people with me, all there, and we needed 946. We were short by 46 people. And my daughter got to see me not fake it. She got to see me do it. And that's the thing that I remind myself of, is when I'm on that stage or when I'm talking to people or I'm in an interview and people say, why me? Why me? Because I decided that I'm going to do it. I decided I'm not faking it. I'm doing it.
And what was the world record attempt?
Oh, that one was out in Australia. We were breaking the world record for the largest image of a house made out of humans. And so we were trying to raise
That was my
money.
second guess, definitely.
We were trying. So all the world records that I've broken 5. All of them are for a good cause. And so in Australia, where we live, there's a big homeless population, and so especially within youth. And so we were trying to raise money for youth off the streets. And what I am proud of with that world record is, even though we didn't break it, we raised over $100,000 for youth off the streets. So I feel really good about that one. But yeah, that was the last one that we did.
You know, talking about children, because I've got young children myself, and hopefully you won't hear them right now. But one thing I do wonder is the world that they are going to be growing up in. Communication skills, and I know some, I'm not saying that schools do no communication skills, but is it an age where some of the things that you and myself had to learn on the job and do it till we made it, that should actually be something that's taken a little bit more seriously as a core skill, rather than something you finish school, you maybe have a debating society or something, but it's often later on in the workplace you have to figure it out. Do you think that's something that educationally needs to be taken a bit more seriously?
I know educationally and in the workplace. We surveyed over 1,200 full-time American employees, and we found out that 85% of them said they would be significantly better at their job if they had communication skills that they could use. 75% of them had never been offered a communication training at their current job, right? So we have leadership training, we have sales training, we have business training, we have HR training. What is the number one problem we all face, no matter what industry we're in? Communication. The Holmes report found out that miscommunication causes $26,000 per employee it costs a company. So you have 100 employees, that's $2.6 million that's being lost every year because you're not training your people how to communicate effectively. So yes, absolutely communication needs to be in education and in the business world, but it's not a sexy word, right? People think because they know how to talk, they think they know how to communicate. See, the thing too, within the industry that we are in and the world that we're in, the economy that we're in, today in 2021, communication, it has never changed. Communication will never change. People think, oh, everyone's communicating. No. Communication, same thing. Break down the words, look at it in the Latin prefixes and suffixes. Com means with, uni means one, ation is a suffix in Latin, which means to take action. So by definition, the word means getting people to take action on one thing. The methods of which we communicate have changed and will always change. So why the older generation might have been better at communicating is because they had 2 or 3 methods. It was easier for them to do because I could meet you in person. I knew the etiquette of what it was to do an email. Well, now we have Slack and Facebook and social media and Instagram and Snapchat and email and and Slack. And the miscommunication is happening because there's so many methods. So yes, we absolutely have to get back to singularity of communication, the way our methods are happening, and focusing in the education and in the workplace of improving it.
There's one thing where I'm amazed that we've been going through lockdowns and everything for a long period of time now, and you'll still see politicians, the chief executives of major companies, and they'll be doing presentations with a laptop on the table pointing up their nose. And you've clearly got yours set up now at eye level and all that kind of thing. And I'm just absolutely blown away that even the basics of how you set up a camera to do a presentation is not known. And that plays to your point that the training is just not there. Now, you deliver your own training, your own teaching. So how do you translate what you do into teaching other people? And I know you teach various things. Do you want to talk a little bit about your kind of your sort of education part of your business?
Yeah, so for the past 10 years, I've studied one thing, and it's the difference of what it means to be a versus what it means to be the at what you do. So people don't want to listen to a podcast, they want to listen to the podcast, right? People don't want to follow a leader, they want to follow the leader. Investors don't want a solution, they want the solution. So I've dedicated my whole life to figuring out what are the differences between a versus the. And so for me, what I do is I go out, I research the differences between A to V, but then how I'm different is I apply that to my life. I use it and see if I can break world records, win world championships, go and go to Antarctica and do something wild. And I use the content that I'm learning to apply to my real life, that then I go out and I teach to show others, hey, this isn't simply a concept that I have found. This is these are strategies that I personally use to parent my children, to run my company, to live my life. So there was this thing that I read early in my career about how and why doctors are looked at as such important groups of society. And what they do is doctors do three things. They learn, they practice, and they teach. And that's how they get better. And so that's how I brought into my practice of public speaking. I learn, I practice, and I teach. So that's how I incorporate in what I do. One of my literary agents, she says, no one's going to pay you for what you're going to do. They're going to pay you for what you've done, right? Like do you want to hear the man who is going to climb Everest or the woman who climbed Everest, right? Like I want to hear the woman who climbed Everest. So yeah, that's what I do.
Because naturally, when you're doing keynote speeches, you know how to engage an audience. You know how to persuade them, to build an argument. Does that translate into?
No, I didn't know it.
How do you translate that into teaching other people? Is it the same skill whether you're, doing a speech on stage somewhere at a conference for 20 minutes, an hour, to actually trying to teach somebody in an online course or coaching or something like that?
Yeah, so whether you go through one of my online courses, you attend one of my keynotes, one of my mentors told me you should teach how you like to be taught. And so for me, when I'm being taught, I love to hear real stories. I love to hear the failures and what they learn, and I want a tangible strategy. I don't want like some big picture concept, thought, and idea. I want like, what can I write? How can I implement this in my business no matter where I am in my business? So that's how I build it. That's how I do it. So whether I'm teaching a group of 5 executives or I'm speaking to 5,000 leaders at a conference, this is how I talk. This is what I wear. I'm not anybody different. I might have a little bit more energy for the 5,000 one because, the stage is like 45 feet on both sides of me. But I simply remind myself, I'm going to teach how I like to be taught, and I'm going to be myself. Like, this is who I am. There are people who don't like me. There might have been people who have already like dropped off this podcast because they're like, he's too weird. But then there are people who like me because they like my style, they like the value that I'm adding, and they like the way that it is. And that's ultimately what I'm wanting to do, is attract people who also like learning in this way.
And when it comes to actually communicating, if somebody's listening to this and they say, I really should step it up. I should try and be the rather than a. I should be out there, putting myself out there, sharing my message, getting better at speaking. What are the main tips that you tend to give people as far as just upping their game? So when they stand on that stage, they are more interesting, they're more confident. What are the main simple tips that somebody could start using straight away?
So several. The first one is making sure you don't use a cliche like "thank you" at the very beginning of your sentence. Okay, like thank you so. It's an honor for me to be here today. I will punch you in the face if I ever hear you say that. Okay, because why? What you're doing is you're automatically being a cliche. That's what everyone else does. Right? So what you want to do is go right into the story. They've already introduced you. You don't need to say, hi, my name is, this is what I've done. Go right into the story. Think of it like a movie. The other thing that a lot of people do when they start off is, I've never seen anyone present on the call right now, but 90% of the people that I've studied, what the very first thing they do is when they go and present is they pivot back on their right foot. Okay, this is a typical thing. They go and then they say, today what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, and they point to a PowerPoint or they pivot back. Well, anytime we move backwards, it's a sign of negativity. It's a sign of weakness. It's a sign for something that's sad. However, anytime we move forward, it's a sign of excitement. It's a sign of happiness. It's the sign for confidence. So watch, I'll say the exact same thing, but I'll move my body differently, and watch how my confidence is demonstrated to you today, okay? Today what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to go from being a leader to being the leader. Versus, today I'm going to show you how to go from being a leader to being the leader. Okay, so even if you're listening to this and you don't see my video, what's happening is you might have heard a different influx, you might have heard a different energy. Well, it's because whenever we move backwards, our biological self is telling us to retreat. So we're going to have a retreat style, we're going to have a retreat voice, we're going to talk slower. Whenever we move forward, we're telling our biological self, this is comfortable, I can be me, you're going to have better energy. So paying attention to the way that your body moves, very important, okay? And then the really, really big one is asking yourself, what value am I adding today? Okay, so when you know that you're going on stage to add value, not to look good, you're going to feel good because you know that you're there to contribute to society or that team. And for me, it makes me feel really good when I know every time I start my presentation saying, these people are going to get something today that changes their life.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Takes it off you, doesn't it? And great tip on that. Funnily enough, when the lockdowns happened and I switched to doing everything on Zoom and Teams, initially I was sitting down just because I had a chair at my desk. And actually I changed everything around so that I could stand up purely because, exactly what you're saying there is the body language and just the energy. When I was sitting down, I was finding it much more difficult to keep my energy up over a period of time. So I absolutely, can see what you mean there as far as the physiology of how you share your message has an impact. If people pay attention to that. Just now sort of looking forwards, you said that next year's looking good, but where do you see this for you now? Because what was your lifestyle like before this whole lockdown? And what do you see it being like in maybe 3 or 4 years' time? Do you think it's going to be going back to how it was? So how was it? And how do you foresee it in the future? Is it all going to be the same traveling around?
Yep. So how was it? I was on the road 200 days a year. Didn't think anything of it. I thought that was the industry. Then COVID hit and I realized I don't want to be on the road like that. I got to tuck my kids into bed. I got to garden with my daughter. I paraglide, so I live in one of the best places in the world to paraglide, and I get to paraglide a lot more. And so I want to be home a lot more. I realized I didn't need or want as much money as I thought I did. And I realized, wow, I want to be home a lot more. I want to be with my kids and wife and be in the house that I love to live in. So for me personally, it has changed for how many keynotes I will offer. I will be doing a lot more virtual. We've moved that to be a big part of our business strategy moving forward, with a lot more in-person or a lot less in-person events and keynotes. And my fee has increased, and I'm always like afraid to increase my fee. And then literally this happened last week, and I said my new fee and they're like, okay. And I was like, gosh darn it, why didn't I say this sooner? Like, what is happening? Granted, I will say there are plenty of times I pitched my new fee too, and they're like, what? You're crazy. But ultimately you're looking for the amount of events that you want to do anyways. I do believe in the next few years, in-person events are going to boom. They're going to skyrocket. They're going to want them. People are going to be very excited about them. And that was a big thing I was trying to tell speakers because they were all pivoting, and people are going to want keynote speakers. And they're going to, and people in my industry, people who hire me, they're not polite in the way of saying, yeah, sure, we'll test you out at our $5 million event. Let's see if you're No. They're going after people who they know they can trust, they know they can rely on, they can bring people back for the next year. So don't run away from keynote speaking if that's what you want to do. Really position yourself as, the keynote speaker in your industry, because I personally believe it's going to go up, personal events.
And obviously taking your training would be one way of doing this. But in simple terms, if somebody's listening and they think, you know what, I would like to do that, and I've got to improve my craft and be better and all that kind of thing. But what are your main tips for actually in practical terms, getting booked, getting noticed, becoming somebody that people want to book for their events?
several things. I would recommend, if you're solely starting out, solely to get used to speaking, start with your local Toastmasters club. Get used to speaking. Once you're like past the level of speaking and you feel comfortable with it, then join your local National Speakers Association or Global Speakers Federation if you're international, and join and learn the business side of speaking. So as part of National Speakers Association, I learn a lot of skills and strategies and business ethics and things that I'm a part of that teach me the business side of speaking. And then plus you're hanging out with the people that you want to be with. There's this thing though, everyone has to take this step. I talk to a lot of people who they take the courses, they go to the conferences and they learn. When are you going to stop learning and when are you going to start doing? And I don't mean like never learn again. I mean like you have to transition out of school. Are you going to be that kid who has like 3 doctorate degrees? Or you're going to go take what you've learned and implement and apply that knowledge to help people? You have to take the step in order to get on it. And that means, again, that first step, get paid for it. Charge $10, ask for $1,000, start asking for it and seeing what you get.
I love your passion, by the way. And that makes me think about a lot of people listening are people who maybe are experts in their field, or they have courses, or they're coaches, or something along those lines. And there's 2 models in a way, obviously more than 2, but one is you just speak wherever you can get an audience, and then you earn money through obviously pitching your wares, your courses, your services, and then there's being paid to speak. What is the difference, and is one better than the other?
The difference. Okay, so I've done both. I'm not the speaker who pitches products. So that's not me. That works for a lot of people. They'll speak for free and then they'll pitch their $300 course or their book, or they'll pitch something, and that works for them. For me, I'm in the industry of clients hire me to make sure and ensure that their conference is either off to a great start or concludes with high energy and excitement where people go, I can't wait to come next year. So they're hiring me for value and they're hiring me for that energy. That's not an appropriate spot to say, buy my book, take my course. If people decided they wanted to do that, fine, but I am not there to sell that. I am there to add value. The hardest part of this industry, one of the hardest parts, is there's 500 ways of doing it. So you'll ask me, you'll ask Mark, you'll ask Shelby, you'll ask Connie, you'll ask all these different people, and they'll tell you all conflicting things. And you'll go, what? Connie does it this way, and Mark does it this way, and Shelby does it this way. What am I supposed to do? Well, what you're supposed to do is figure out what works for you and actually do it. Not fake it, not think about it, not learn about it, do it. So that's like the big thing for me is there's a difference between the other one too for me is I don't know about this because I haven't done it in a really long time, but those who might sell from the stage, you're getting a very different audience versus those who are not selling from a stage. You're going to be more corporate. You're going to be more business oriented. You're going to be more like keynoting. Selling from a stage might be more like training, associations. You might be have your own events where you charge $30 for the door and you sell 1,000 tickets or something like that. It depends on what style of business you want to run.
Great answer. Well done. And just a final question. You touched on a few of these things. You talked about the demand for in-person events. And you also spoke about when somebody's booking you, their neck is on the block. They're putting the reputation on the line by booking you. 100%. So when you show up, you've got to give people a great experience. And I think that word experience is coming up a lot now. What do you see the trends being over the next few years in events, in public speaking? What do you think the trends to look out for are over the next maybe 5 years?
The first trend is, as speakers, knowing how to speak in a hybrid setting. So there will be conferences that you have to address your virtual audience and your in-person audience, and knowing how to connect them, providing content and strategies to make the virtual community feel like they're still at that event is going to be critical. The other component too is more of a micro level of speaking, where instead of doing 20 events at 25,000, you might now do 100 events at 5,000, right? So it might be doing a lot more for less versus like bigger events might be part of your strategy as well. I'm not saying the bigger events are going away. I'm saying in looking at the strategy, that's how we're approaching it of, since we don't want to be on the road so much, we might be doing more virtual events, but our fee might be less because that's what the industry or that's what, the market is paying right now. So those would be two very big trends. I believe too, in the future, we're going to see a lot of holograms. In the next 5-10 years, we're going to start seeing speakers promoting themselves as hologram. Like we might even in the future have a hologram studio where this is no longer a podcast, but you step on and you're in your hologram, is something I see. Another really, really big one that I see, because this is part of my world, but I believe it's going to, infiltrate into a lot of others, is you got to be global. You have to understand that there are people who might be from Australia or India or South Africa or China or Venezuela or all over the place, and knowing how to interact with an international audience is key if you're seriously wanting to keynote. It can't be America. It's got to be global.
And are there any particular topics that you're seeing suddenly becoming very fashionable or huge demand for?
I don't. For me personally, because I focus on the basics of leadership, sales, and communication, and those are the way that we lead, the way that we sell, the way that we communicate, definitely changing. Those are adapting. Those are skills that we need to update and improve. But I don't see any major trends that I'm currently seeing. I mean. And I hate the word trend. Maybe that's what I'm getting caught up on. But to me, what I'm seeing more importance of that I love to see is we're seeing a lot of diversity and inclusion talks, which I love because we needed more of that a long time ago, right? We're seeing more communication talks. People are understanding communication. We're seeing a lot of how to work from home and how to lead from a virtual space. So virtual obviously is a big one. So the two important trends. And I don't want to.
Well, let's change the word. Forget I ever said that. But in a sense, what are people interested in at the moment?
Topic.
Yeah,
important topics. Definitely diversity and inclusion. Definitely how to lead in a virtual space are what I'm seeing that I like to see more of.
Great. Well, I'm sure like to see more of. People would like to see more of you and find out more about you. Where do they go? How do they connect with you? How do they find out about you? Where's the best place to go?
Best place. So I don't have social media. So the best place is ryanavery.com. Those of you who'd like every Tuesday from Bellevue University, I speak for 15 minutes live, and you can go to ryanavery.com/Tuesday. Because every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern time, I get 15 minutes of motivation and inspiration thanks to Bellevue University. So you can do that as well. So ryanavery.com is the best place to find me.
Great. Well, it's been fantastic. I've learned a lot, and I love your I hate to use the word vibe because it's probably as annoying as the word trends. But in the sense, you can feel your passion, the ethos that you're coming at it with. So congratulations on your success. And I'm going to be tuning in. So that was /Tuesday, wasn't it? Okay, I'll be there. But thanks very much. And I hope maybe we'll chat again sometime soon.
You got it. I would love that. Thanks, Mark.
If you want to get started showing up on video and sharing your expertise, head over to markeganvideo.com to access some of my free training. Don't forget to join the Knowledge Industry group on Facebook, and if you want to connect, head to markeganvideo.com.